Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crypto News Podcast. We are buzzing as always, and I am super pumped to have today's guest on the show. Before we get into the intro, as always, guys, when I have someone on the pod whose company I am invested in, I always let you guys know. And I am invested in Leah's company. When did I first get in? 2020. I want to say it was like March or April, way back in the day. It wasn't even called Soul Strategies back then. It was called Cypherpunk Holdings. And Tony G was still running the show back in the day, and it was a Bitcoin publicly traded play. Now it is not a play, it is the publicly traded play for Solana, and we will get into that. But time for the intro. Today we have Leah Wald on the show, CEO of Soul Strategies, a publicly traded Canadian company actively investing in and supporting and providing infrastructure for the Solana blockchain ecosystem. Prior to Soul Strategies, Leah co-founded and was the CEO of Valkyrie Investments, leading the firm to over 1.3 billion AUM, wow, through cryptocurrency trusts, hedge funds, and ETFs. That got acquired by CoinShares and its private trust division by Abra Capital in 2024. Leah also worked for the World Bank Group in sub-Saharan African region and served as a partner at Lucid Investment Strategies. Also an author. I need to get your book on my bookshelf back there. And contributing writer for Forbes, and the book is called The Hyperwave Theory, The Rogue Waves of Financial Markets. Wow, what a bio. I need to go up and get some air and take a sip of water. Leah, welcome to the show. How are you this morning?
Good, Matt. Thanks so much for having me.
Pumped to have you on. I do need to get your book up there. Gotta add that. Yeah, gotta add that to the collection. Let's just jump right into it. And just for the listeners, I want to say my first ever buy was 6 cents. To my first Soul Strategies buy was 6 cents. I think I bought again at like 9 cents, 12 cents. My highest buy, I think, was like 28 cents.
Yes.
I worked for Cypherpunk back in the day. Leah joined last summer, but maybe it was just, last summer in 2024. And I never thought I'd have a 30 bag, like a 30x ROI in public markets, but Leah, while running the show at Soul Strategies, did that. So I guess I just got to start by saying thank you for making me an absolute bag. I love you for that.
Honored to do so. Thanks so much, Matt. Yeah, those were the good days. And actually, I've been on the board since 2021. So also seeing, the fluctuations, the stock got as low as 3 cents. So to your point, come January, we hit over $6. So it's been a ride.
So when you fully took helm back in 2024, about, we'll call it 9 months ago, almost a year ago, did you think that it would go to 6 this quick? Like everything was a perfect storm. You guys came in, you did an amazing job on the rebrand. Bitcoin, if you would have stayed a Cypherpunk, you still definitely would have made some moves, but like it was just a perfect transition and pivot to Soul. Soul kept ripping. All the activities currently on Soul, whether it's RWAs, whether it's DPIN, whether it's DeFi, like all of the liquidity from Ethereum is getting sucked out and going to Soul. Did you think that it would be this successful? I'm sure you knew it would be successful, but $6 successful?
Yeah, not at all. I mean, this is quite the ride. It was interesting, obviously. So again, I've been on the board since 2021. The rest of the board asked if I wanted to come on as the CEO last summer, as you mentioned. And I finally joined in July. So management and the board, we sat down, and actually at that time, I was the only full-time employee. We had a little cohort of consultants and the board. So really, kind of starting from scratch, because as you remember, it was a Bitcoin holding company. So it was making money, chugging along, but very little investor interest. So we said, what's the opportunity, and the writing on the wall for us was Solana. Let's keep within the same roots that the company has started with, being the first to put on the balance sheet, right? So as you remember, because you were early and worked at the company, that Cypherpunk Holdings was very innovative in that in 2018, they put Bitcoin on the balance sheet and made Bitcoin investments. They were the first public equity. It was fascinating. They got a lot of participation back then, but then when the ETFs came out, it was a little less interesting to the market, right? Well-run business, not much investor participation, so got stuck in very low penny stock land. So we said, all right, it's July, writing on the wall, Solana ETFs aren't going to come out soon. To your point, they came out yesterday in Canada for spot, and then Volatility Shares launched a futures product, but as many people don't know, not everybody can buy futures, right? So that product isn't going to gain probably larger adoption until spot comes around. And that was 2 weeks ago during the Digital Asset Summit. So we had this huge lead time and we said, all right, people want SOL and the FTX unlock is happening. So we believe SOL is going to rip. And we also think that we could be that only vehicle in the market that provides great, excellent, high quality exposure. And what I mean by that is that we thought the thesis of being MicroStrategy as SOL was weak, right? I think that, it's an inferior vehicle. You're soliciting and putting yourself out to be a vehicle, not a vehicle. We're a company, right? So I wanted to run it like a company. So from the get-go, we started running our own validators, and then we just acquired validators until we started being able to really go out and have meaningful business development as well. But as you're aware, since you like Solana as well, obviously, two Sol Maxis in the room right now, or virtually in the room, we were very picky on which validators we went after. We first acquired Cogent, which is, a highly respected validator, but also website with a lot of IP. Typically, and if listeners here are trying to get into Solana or want to learn about validators, you can go to the Cogent website and it has a bunch of calculators and just really easy to use tools for anyone new to the ecosystem to understand the economics, right? So we love that. It had a big community. It has a big Discord. They're all lovely. Fantastic. The next one was Orangefin. And that was just the best because we were able to get Max. Yeah. So he's our monster under the hood. Everybody should get to know Max. So Max co-founded Orangefin Ventures. And that was one of the most well-run validators in the ecosystem. Max was formerly the senior director of engineering at Kraken. So now he's our CTO. So that was the next acquisition. And the latest one to get us to where we are is Lane StakeWiz. So anyone in Solana knows stakewiz.com. That's where you're going for the most part. You're going Solana Beach, you're going stakewiz.com. But also the Lane validator had 100% uptime. It's an extremely well-run validator. And Michael at the helm is very well respected in the ecosystem. Both Max and Michael contribute actively to code as well as running tests. So we were one of the first testers for Firedancer, etc. So that got us to where we are today. We're running validators. We're starting to wheel and deal with partnerships, with the right partnerships in the ecosystem, getting integrated on all the platforms with custodians. But we are very much squarely what I believe to be the top Solana infrastructure company that you could buy on the market. Long-winded answer.
No,
Had to explain it.
I love that. Great start to the show. My favorite play of all, and again, I've been in this company for quite some time, is the change from just being sort of a proxy play for Solana, right? Being that like, hey, if you want exposure to Solana via a publicly traded investment vehicle, look for Sol Strategies. I love the change from that to we are now a legit company that creates revenue. And that, for me, that was the big, like, okay, these guys are moving and grooving. Like, this isn't just a hodling company anymore, which Cypherpunk Holdings used to be in the day. With that being said, the one question that I keep getting, and I'm a bit of a, I've told many friends to buy this on the way up. Many listened and owe you a thank you as well. But one of the questions that I kept getting was, well, Matt, what about the Solana ETFs? And I said, well, look, like obviously it's competition, but it's good competition. And the ETFs, for the most part, they don't have the team and they don't have the validators that create that recurring revenue and the acquisitions. Like an ETF is just going to buy SOL, they're going to HODL that SOL, they might stake that SOL, but they don't have the SOL infra that you guys are doing and the leaders that you are doing. And I'm sure you're going to get asked hundreds of times over the next couple of weeks and months, Leah, how do you guys differ from a SOL ETF? What do you think about the SOL ETFs? So I'm going to throw the ball over to your court. What do you think about the SOL ETFs?
It's my favorite question because I'm coming from ETFs, right? And there's a very specific reason that we're not running a SOL ETF, even though that's my expertise, right? Or again, why I think the MicroStrategy of SOL thesis is weak because of my background with ETFs. So as mentioned, I co-founded a brand new firm called Valkyrie Investments. We launched some of the first ETFs in the United States. We even launched the first, NASDAQ traded Bitcoin futures ETF in 2021. We actually put our spot application in January 2021. So long time working on ETFs. We had 5 out there. Okay. But what's interesting to your point is that Bitcoin miners were always played more than the Bitcoin ETFs until spot came out. Okay. And that's because they were typically seen as a leverage play.
Bingo.
Over spot. And not just the Bitcoin miners, specifically Valkyrie ran a Bitcoin miners ETF. So I was able to see it. We were putting no sales and marketing into it at the time, and yet it was the best performing ETF in America, 2023, non-levered ETF, okay? Seeing loads of flow, even though in 2023, why would it be, right? ETH came out, blended, obviously futures, but blended.
Yeah.
You had inverse, you had leveraged, you had all these different thematic ETFs. You had about 1.5 billion in thematic blockchain ETFs run by great managers like Fidelity and Skybridge. So why the miners, right? Because you're absolutely right. The success of an ETF is tracking. You want to be able to simply track. You want to, in the end of the day, if Bitcoin is up 3%, you want your ETF to be up 3%, right? That's success. But if you're able to invest in a company that you believe has more to it, that's a leverage play, right? So what I thought was always interesting, running the different products with Bitcoin miners ETF and seeing the appetite with Bitcoin spot ETF or the futures ETF or the thematic ETFs as well, was just seeing that they're actually complementary products. Not everybody and investors are going to get comfortable with spot underlying, right? They're going to say, well, why would I buy Sol over ETH over XRP will probably come out soon too, right? Any of these other tokens, I'm just not there yet. But, this Bitcoin miner, I can do fundamental analysis on it, right? I can treat it like a mining company. And in Canada, it's mining galore companies. So, investors know how to assess a mining company. So we try to also explain in a really very clear way from an EPS perspective, you can do the same fundamental analysis, staking, validators, akin to miners, but let me tell you how they're different, but do the same analysis. So to your point, it's accretive. I absolutely see the, advent of having two products as being more powerful than just having one, because then boots on the ground selling these things is just education for both. So that's the name of the game that I saw.
100%. One thing that I think about, and this is maybe I'm 100% wrong here, but I look at my parents, I look at my friends' parents, and like they're ETF folks, like if there's an ETF on the market, they're going to hammer that. But then I look at my friends, like we don't give a shite about ETFs. I'm going to be honest, especially when you're in the crypto game and you've, seen huge baggers, or you've, done well with Sol strategies and got a 30 bagger there. An ETF just isn't that sexy. And investors my age, I just turned 30, even people a little bit older, a little bit younger than me, we're not in it for this like long term, like let's watch everything go up. I feel like it's a different world, Leah. Like house prices are so high. No one knows what's going to happen if AI is going to steal all of our jobs in 10 years and we're all going to be on UBI. I feel like there's this big sort of intrinsic need to get wealthy quick. And I feel like not that should be an investment sort of motto by any means, but I feel like that's a huge play where it's like, if you guys can explain to the boomers that, hey, we have way more upside and the downside isn't like there's way more reward and probably just slightly more risk than the ETF, and it's worth it. I feel like if you could get to the boomers, that would be huge. You know what I mean?
I'm with you entirely. The only thing I'm laughing at is I set up a River account for my parents to DCA $100 a month back in 2019. So, they're just, they didn't make much money relatively, but, they're rolling in it on the spot. But, the Bitcoiner in me couldn't help myself. But no, to your point, that's exactly right. And that's where an equity is important over a fund. And specifically for that generation who does like ETFs, the blockchain thematics are fantastic for them, right? But only typically they're just equity based. So having, Block is one of the largest blockchain thematic equity ETFs, right?
Yeah.
I think that they have over 900 million. It's run by Amplify. It's a very well run fund. We had equity, obviously Bitcoin miners being more of a niche equity, but there's a lot of blockchain equity ETFs. They look for diversification. And as they look for diversification, you're still getting that safe exposure, but maybe with a little bit more alpha than they had in the past, if they have opportunities to invest in different companies that are more high growth. And I do think that generally speaking, crypto acts like right now, for better or for worse, we could go into that kind of high beta NASDAQ type of stock. Right.
100%.
So what that means is right now it's a scary time in the market for all of us. But when there's a bull market, when there's opportunity, when we're seeing risk on, you're seeing a whole lot of flow and interest and participation in crypto equities, in some of the ETFs. And again, for the boomers, the blockchain ETFs is as far risk as they want to go, but they can start allocating in interesting ways and participate in, a couple other small allocations. We're in a couple of ETFs, we're in a couple of indexes now as well. So I think that it just provides more opportunity to, find these kind of diversifiers. But how do we get the boomers in? I think it's just well-run companies. We're trying our best to be that company, right? Going through SOC 1, SOC 2, ISO standards, Max is coming in with that Kraken mentality of how do we ensure everything is as compliant as possible with the best reporting possible. That's also why we do stuff that no one else would ever do. And so people appreciate us for it, even though they don't know. But we publish everything on Dune. So Max actually created a dashboard that shows our revenue in real time. So if anyone wants to know what we're actually making, there's nothing under the hood and you don't need to wait for earnings. It's public. We put everything out transparently, publicly. So there's no concerns. Our hope is that there would be no concerns by investors who want to understand the fundamental analysis to say, but is the revenue still that way? I heard that Sol is, moving around. We could say, well, actually, here you go.
Yeah, take a peek.
That's how much we're making every epoch.
Yeah.
So that's how we're trying to go about it.
Yeah, well said. I think two sort of main points in particular really hurt the boomer mentality in regards to investing in crypto. Again, I'll use the traditional example. Well, I guess there's really three. First is onboarding, where it's like, it's such a shit show. Like in order to actually self-custody and HODL your crypto, like boomers aren't doing that. I'm sorry. It's nightmare fuel. They're not going to go KYC on an exchange, then buy it on an exchange, then send it to a cold wallet or even a hot wallet. They're just not doing that. And that's why I think that the publicly traded investment vehicles for crypto are so good. But the volatility is an absolute killer. Like they don't like volatility. And again, do I like when Sol goes from 300 to 100? No, but I understand it's going to go back to 300, so I'm not worried. And the last thing is, I think that lack of mass adoption, and this is where I think this is like one of my bull cases for Sol, Leah, is with all the teams building on Sol right now. And I'm sure you're on crypto Twitter way too many hours a day, just like me, but all of the best companies are building on Solana. Like, I think that killer crypto consumer app has a very high chance of actually being built and going live on Solana. And then that will go viral, onboard the Web2 folks, onboard the boomers. And then they'll be like, damn, Solana's pretty good. I want exposure to this. Ooh, ding, ding, ding. Sol strategies. Like that's sort of how I see it going. Because back in the day with sort of Web2, you didn't really have those plays to the actual to the coding languages. Like you couldn't get on C++ or Node or Java. Like there was no publicly traded Java company. But now there sort of is. You know what I mean there? Like maybe I'm way out to lunch, but that's a bit of a hot take that I have, and just another reason why I think publicly traded Sol companies have so much room to grow.
I mean, obviously we're aligned. It's an interesting time, and even backing it up further with the boomers, because you really got me on something, and I think that relates to, your previous comment. Usually they're not trading themselves, right? They're calling their financial advisors and their RIAs or IAs in Canada, and they're saying, hey, I heard about this thing, Sol Strategies. Like, can we invest in it? Can we buy it? Like, what do you think, right? And what was important to note, and why the ETFs didn't get as much traction as they could have in the United States, is actually because they weren't on the platforms for investment advisors to even be able to buy them for their clients. Moreover, we'd go into offices and the RIAs or larger allocators as well would say, no, I know I'm getting a lot of calls, but it's outside my risk parameters. I don't know how to assess it.
That's such bollocks. You're so right, but it's such bollocks.
Oh, man. I was so cheeky, but I'd be like, so have you ever invested in a microcap before? Because I'm sure there's something called stops and limits. But, it was like, I think you're a professional investment advisor. You know how to set stops and limits, so it was interesting conversations. I was like, and even then it's like such easy comparisons for us. Do you know anything about precious metals? you ever invested in sister precious metals? Have you ever invested in a microcap? Any of these things, like, of course, they've done it for the most part, if they are, true investment advisors that have been around the block. But yes, they couldn't get comfortable with it for a while. So it's interesting because we're finally at that point and we're finally on different platforms. But even the spot Bitcoin ETFs aren't on all platforms. You even have Vanguard, who still says they're not going to allocate in their models, but they've had investments in Marathon for a very long time, right?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting, thing because, again, it isn't just the boomers who, for the most part, aren't self-directing. They're calling their guy or gal, right? And saying, I've heard about this thing. It's very interesting. Can you look into it for me? And then it depends on the investment appetite and the understanding and or curiosity of that investment advisor to then make an allocation that's meaningful. So, you're absolutely right. I think the narrative is stronger when you're a company, when they can call the CEO, and they do. We have an investor relations portal and a professional firm, to handle any inbound calls. You can talk to the CFO, look at our earnings, you can look at all our audited financial statements and everything on the blockchain, right? And I think that's how we get people there with Solana. But you're absolutely right. The interesting thing about builders on the Solana ecosystem and why we're here is I agree with you, right? Like, there's so much going on. The question I'm asking myself and excited about is, what's Solana's real use case to build on? So obviously, I think we all agree that it's speed, it's efficiency, it's all the pillars that we love. But is that going to be used for funds? Is that going to be used for financial rails? Does that really just become a gaming niche? It's cool to see that Solana is still, I see, as a sandbox. And there's a lot of very meaningful projects being built, brilliant builders and developers. And yet it could go in a myriad of ways when it figures itself out, right? I think that Bitcoin finally figured itself out as a store of value asset, right? There's Lightning and Liquid, and we could do things with it. But I think it's squarely a store of value asset for investors, right? I think Ethereum did figure itself out and then kind of went wayward with its messaging. But I think the cool thing about Solana is it can be so many different things, and it's still figuring itself out. And its niche of where it just wins. And I love that, we're a part of that.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Leah, you're on a roll here. We've got to give a quick shout out to our sponsor of the show, Prime XBT. And when we get back, we're going to keep buzzing on Soul Strategies, their huge partnership with Pudgy Penguins and the branded validators, which I cannot wait to get into. Until then, huge shout out to Prime XBT, longtime friends and longtime sponsors of the Crypto News podcast. We love the team at Prime XBT as they offer a robust trading system for both beginners and professional traders. It doesn't matter if you're a rookie or a vet, you can easily design and customize your layouts and widgets to best fit your trading style. They are also offering a fat promo for you guys and gals. 50% of your first deposit will be credited to your account as a bonus that can be used as additional collateral to open positions. Again, that's Crypto News 50, Crypto News 50, all one word, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Now back to the show with Leah. Pudgy Penguins. This was an absolute banger. This happened Monday or Tuesday this week. Again, we're recording on Thursday the 17th. This will air on the 24th, I believe, this coming Thursday by the time you guys listen to this. This was an absolute banger because, well, for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, Pudgy Penguins has, like, brand value has such an emphasis in crypto because there's so many scammers and because so many people have dropped the ball. I mean, look what happened this week with Mantra, and unfortunately had JP on the pod, and then the whole thing goes to shit. Story for another day. Just another week at the office for us crypto folks. But Pudgy Penguins, literally, like, maybe after Bored Ape, maybe ahead of Bored Ape, but arguably top 3 NFT community of all time and real world products. They sell toys, they sell games, they have the whole 9 yards, they got tokens, they're doing it all. How did this go down? And what was the purpose of this? Was this like a, hey, we want to gather more exposure and mind share for crypto folks? Was this like, this is just a good partnership? Walk me through, like, head to toe what happened here, because I'm so interested in how you managed to lock this up.
I mean, Matt, who wouldn't want to work with Pudgy Penguins? They are adorable. Who doesn't want one of those plushes? They got those cute eyes. Like, obviously you want to work with them. But actually backing up, it was very interesting from a business perspective to learn that they wanted to run a validator. You don't see that for NFT communities, right? That they actually, even if they launch a token, which they obviously launched their token successfully on Solana recently, that was a huge coup for Solana to bring
Yep.
them over. But
100%.
to want to run a validator is to actively and financially decide to participate in the ecosystem. So huge kudos to the Pudgy Penguin team. And we're so, excited that we got to talk to them and actually do it together, because we just see that as, it just a great way to actually care about the ecosystem. So for us, it's our first time making a public debut that we are running a white label validator business, right? So this is our 5th validator that we're running at this point, which is just awesome. And maybe I should note that our CTO actually just, again, in full transparency, that's what we're about, published a technical blog about actually how to run so many validators in an enterprise environment. So playbooks out, guys. We're all about that. But no, so that was the cool thing about working with Pudgy and continuing to work with Pudgy Penguins is they have this just strong community, and they're also participating actively in the infrastructure of Solana. So, that's I'm glad that they chose us.
Yeah, no, that was huge. And again, going back to like the positioning of Soul Strategies, so strong with the publicly traded world. Everyone knows who you guys are. It's still wild how many crypto folks don't invest outside of crypto. Like I have some friends who I've met at conferences, not like true friends, because all my Canadian friends invest in, we have our RSP, our TFSA. It's our version of the tax-free stuff for the American listeners. But so many of my crypto degen friends, Leah, do not have any exposure to MicroStrategy, do not have any exposure to any of the mining companies, Marathon, you name it, no ETFs. It's strictly that. So I think this was a great play for that as well, to be like, hey, crypto guys, like there's a publicly traded company that is partnered with Pudgy Penguins. That's pretty big,
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And look, there's, it's a really exciting time to be in this market. You've been in crypto, your listeners, I think any of the listeners here probably have been in crypto for a long time. It's hard to determine exactly what this market is, but it's not a bull market, right? And anyone successful knows that you keep your head down, you build, you build, you build, you build. You conserve cash. We're doing just fine on that front. We're very lucky. We've always been in a very strong liquidity position, and we're a public company. So there's great opportunity there. However, we're building. Whether it's launching this white label validator service and therefore working with other communities that want to engage, on Solana.
You gotta sort of cut you off. We are getting a little tight for time here, but you gotta tell me about this, because that was my next question. I really want to know more about the branded validators. Huge way to just give digital footprint to brands while making bands as well. Tell us about that.
Yeah. We see it as the next wave. Obviously, a lot of other companies are doing white label validator services under the hood, but we want to work with those communities that, like Pudgy Penguins, are still trying to understand how to participate better. There's a lot of crypto native institutional investors that just want a white label in order to have their brand right out there. But that isn't the same as Pudgy Penguins, who quite literally promoted the heck out of the fact that we have a great partnership. Right? There was no airs that it's just them doing it. No, they were proud to have a partnership, and we love that. And I think that that's where the next wave is going, is partnering with firms that are actively engaged with goodwill in the ecosystem. Hopefully that's seen as Soul Strategies, but I think everyone's going to start doing this, because why wouldn't you run a validator yourself and secure the network, actively participate, and make yield? So I think that that's definitely the next wave we're going to continue to see. And I think it's going to get more sophisticated given the sophistication of things you can do in Solana with liquid staking tokens and running different clients, et cetera.
Yeah, well said. Leah, what an episode. Really appreciate you coming on. I mean, it's tough as a publicly traded company. Normally when I ask a traditional crypto CEO who comes on the pod, and I say, hey, what kind of news you got coming out? They usually give me some goods, but I feel like you can't disclose that info because you are under the law. So can you tell me anything? Can you give us any breaking news? This episode will air in 1 week, mind you. But is there anything you can give us before we let you go today?
Yeah, I think the important material non-public, right? Everything that I can say that I would love everybody be on the lookout for is how much we're building. So people aren't aware that the fact that we launched the only Solana-specific staking app right? It's on mobile, it's on Apple, it's on Google Play. Max is building a lot. We launched a bunch of dashboards. We're still running stakewiz.com and keeping it maintained, and Cogent, and integrations with wallets and websites. So, on the business and financial front, correct. Can't say much, but I think that that's going to be an important development. If anyone wants to see our work, we also, keep everything public and publish it on the blogs, but we're building our own tech. And that's important for this year.
Well said. Leah, great episode. Really appreciate you having on. And we'll have to have you on for round 2, or Max on for round 1, so we can take a crazy technical dive and get into his brilliant Solana head. Before we let you go, can you please let our listeners know where they can find you personally, Soul Strategies, both you guys online, and of course, drop the tickers, and you guys still have the best ticker in all of public markets as well.
We do. It's still HODL. So HODL for the CSE. You can find me on Twitter. It's my name. Impersonators have gotten better these days. So, Leah Wald. You can also find Soul Strategies, soulstrategies.io. We also have Soul Strategies Twitter account. But generally speaking, reach out to me, reach out to anyone at Soul Strategies, and we're actually really good. Our DMs are open by design. LinkedIn as well. So, we always want to hear from folks, even if it's on ceo.ca. So, nod at the end.
Love it. Folks, what an episode with Leah Wald, CEO of Soul Strategies. Huge shout out to Leah and the team for making this happen. If you guys enjoyed this one, and I hope you did, please do subscribe. It would mean the world to my team and I, speaking to the team. Love you guys. Thank you so much for everything. And back to the listeners, keep on growing those bags and keep on staying happy, healthy, and wealthy. Love you guys, and see you on the next one. Ciao.